accordance with the Establishment Subcommittee Rules 11, if the chairman and the vice chairman cannot attend a meeting, then in accordance with that rule, we can elect a chairman to stand in the place of the chairman. So we have formed a quorum. So can we now have a nomination? Mr. Yu Si-wing, Mr. Wang Ting-kwang, Mr. Peter Xu, seconded. Mr. Wang, do you accept the nomination? Any other nomination? If not, then Mr. Wang will please chair the meeting. Oh, the chair lady has arrived. Good morning, members. Sorry, I have let you down. There was a traffic jam at the Kennedy Road. There are now 9 papers on the agenda today. We should have 9 papers for discussion. However, last night, the government sent us a letter telling us that one of the items have to be withdrawn, and that is EC 2017-18-7, and that has to do with the proposal for making permanent one supernumerary post of Assistant Director of Environmental Protection in the EPD. So we have to amend the agenda. So we have now 8 papers. So this letter of the government has been tabled for members' reference. So we have revised the agenda duly. So there are 9, or rather 8 discussion items. I'd like to remind members that if you have a direct or indirect pecuniary interest in relation to the matters to be discussed today, please, in accordance with Rules of Procedure 83A, disclose the nature of that interest before you speak. I would also like members to note ROP 84 on requirements on voting when there is a direct pecuniary interest involved. Okay, item 1. And then there's an item from the HAB. We have discussed that last time, and that is a retention of one supernumerary post of Administrative Officer Staff Grade CD2 in the Community Care Fund Secretariat under the Home Affairs Bureau for 5 years from 1st of July this year to the 30th of June 2022 to continue to provide dedicated directorate support to the CCF to ensure its smooth operation. We started discussing this item in the last meeting, so I'm not going to introduce the government officers present today again. So 4 members will be asking questions. The first one is Mr. Raymond Chan. First round, 5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to follow up on the business sector's donation to the CCF. In the government's latest paper submitted to us, it sets out the amount received from various sectors over the years. So the first question is, for this post, does this person have the responsibility to raise funds or to oversee the fund and say in case there is not much donation from the business community, should he do something? From 10 to 11 and 16 to 17, you see that the business donation has dropped drastically over these years. it seems that there is no donation at all, practically. So is it the case that you have not been proactive in soliciting donations? You just receive whatever is given to you? He or she should be managing the fund. Maybe the big boss has a lot of money, and if there is no money, then the big boss will inject the funds. But then, if that is not the case, if the amount drops so drastically, the person should have the responsibility to make sure that it doesn't happen. Mr. Low, of course, the PAS will have to oversee the operation of the funds and also try to make sure that the cash flow is healthy and so on. But then fundraising doesn't fall under his work portfolio. Now, let me explain the aspect of fundraising. Last time, upon members' request, we have given you the paper showing the amount of donations over the past few years. The members' observation is correct. The donations were more in the initial years. In the initial years of the establishment of the fund, there may be business donations which will be paid over the years. So from 10, 11, 14 to 14, 14 to 15, well, the donor said that the payment would be made over several years, so there were larger sums donated in the first few years. And last time we did mention, we have a balance of $20 billion in the fund, and there are so many projects still ongoing. And in recent years, have not taken the initiative to solicit funds from the business sector. But of course, we welcome anyone who is interested in donating towards the fund. So every year, we still see some donations coming in, but we are not taking, we are not being very proactive in soliciting funds from the community. So the DS said that the person will not take the initiative to raise funds. And of course, I don't expect this person to actually call up, say, Li Ka-shing to solicit donations. But then in the initial years, whose responsibility was it to raise funds? The person doesn't have to raise funds.
But then does it mean that he has certain responsibility to do certain things? Well, he might just be issuing letters on a regular basis every year to certain potential donors. It's like asking people or inviting people to donate blood. Or is it that you don't have to do anything and you think that the business sector will take its own initiative by donating money to the fund? Yes, we'll be monitoring the cash flow situation and whether or not certain assets can also be put into some investments. But then at present, we do not have any plan to take the initiative to reach out to the community to raise funds. But then if members have this suggestion, thinking that this fund should continue to take the initiative to raise funds or raise donations from the community, well, we will pass it on to the fund for consideration. We can consider doing it again. Well, whether or not you're doing it on a large scale and on a proactive basis, that's another story. But then what I was saying was, well, should you be writing to the regular donor to ask them that they could donate money on a regular basis? As to whether or not you're going to do it on a proactive basis, well, since you're going to spend money on the 20th anniversary of the handover, you might as well write to them to invite donations. I think that would be more meaningful by having fireworks display and other celebration activities. So is it that this post does not have the responsibility to collect feedback from the community and also to reflect that the views of the community to the Secretariat or to the fund? That's what I was wondering. Yes, Mr. Lau Kwok Fan. Yes, I support that the Secretariat should keep this post, because this person is responsible for liaising with the Poverty Commission and the other bodies. And one of his tasks is to consult the public and the stakeholders on what programs should continue. And I understand that, well, for most of the programs that were undertaken by the fund, most of them were referred to it by the Poverty Commission. And if you look at the new programs, about 6 of them were newly added programs to help the grassroots. So my question is on consultation with the public. In the past, what programs were the result of the consultation undertaken by the Secretariat with the public, so that after consulting the public, these programs were determined by the fund to introduce or roll out? Well, as I said last time, we mainly collect views from our website and also letters and so on. Every year we conducted 2 public consultation sessions every year, and I personally also attended those sessions. And very often from the consultation sessions we would be listening to the disadvantaged groups, for example the chronically ill, and also those who require community care, so and also students with special needs. So these would be groups that will be meeting, and the views would also be passed on to the dedicated committee. For example, so for the carers of the low-income persons with disabilities, so we run a pilot scheme on living allowance for low-income carers of persons with disabilities. Well, after collecting the views at the consultation sessions, we pass the views on to the relevant committee, and as a result of that, we roll out this pilot scheme. So I'd like to ask a bit further. All right, you do that kind of consultation twice a year. So how do you invite the participants to the consultation session? I'll defer to the permanent or the colleague. Yes, we would put out advertisements, and also we would also advertise through the Poverty Commission. So through these channels we invite the public to participate in the consultation session. All right, point taken. I hope that the fund will continue to listen to the views of the community, because I think the CCF is a good thing, because under government's existing policies there might be certain gaps that have to be filled, and therefore the CCF plays a very vital role in closing those gaps. So I hope that this post can be kept so that the CCF will operate smoothly. But then for the nothing persons, in terms of our assistance to them, well, for a long time, very few have been done. So I hope that with this post kept for the nothing persons, I think we should regularize our support for them. I hope that you can listen to views on this. I don't think you need to consult any further, because I think there is a consensus in the community already on this, and the views are very clear. Yes, with regard to the subsidy or allowance for the nothing persons, well, in fact, during the past few months, well, at least at the HA panel and other panels, we have had discussions on that already, and I don't think I need to repeat the crux of the discussions here. Well, we understand public concern, but then we do have this concern, that is we are of the view that there are other ways to help these nothing persons. In fact, on the 26th of June, at the next meeting of the HA panel, the CCF will also be reporting the work of the CCF to the panel, and I think that would be the right forum for us to discuss it. Well, given the fact that the public have such strong sentiments on this, I think we need to look into that. And my question is, on what basis would you be taking on board the views of the public, or what? All right, you can ask that next time. Next, Dr. Kwokaki, 3 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. All right, we have got the latest Gini coefficient is 0.539, and we can see that for the CCF, I've been joking that is the fund that would try to plug the loopholes and also make up for the shortfall. So whenever there are problems with certain government policies, the CCF will come forward to try and make up for the shortfall. But then it should be honest to its name, because in 2007 and 08, we all knew it very well that it's supposed to be a fund whereby the government and the business sector would be working together to raise funds to help the poor. So that's very important. And secondly, through the business sector, there would be some new thinking injected into the Secretariat or into the committee, instead of relying solely on the government for helping the disadvantaged. And if there is no vision to help the entire community to resolve the problem of poverty, is not good. And that has never been the intention of the CCF. And apparently, if 99% of the funds come from the administration, it should not have been the CCF doing this. Because for programs primarily sponsored or funded by the administration, then this council should have the chance to vet how the funds are used. Now the CCF has circumvented that route, and yet it has not been able to do what it has pledged to do, and now is seeking further funds to continue with this work. So it shows that the administration has never reflected on itself. Number one, the fund has never been able to do its job properly, and second, if most of the funds have come from the government, then why is it that you are not going to resort to the conventional channel of coming to this council for funding, and instead you're setting up this CCF to circumvent public monitoring? Yes, Deputy Secretary. All right, this is a community care fund. That's why it is able to make arrangements for contingency support for the disadvantaged. So it's more flexible, and it's more flexible. So after it tested on certain programs, we can regularize those programs, and every time after certain pilot schemes are introduced, they can report back to the task force, and then the relevant NGOs can also look into the possibility of regularizing those programs. In the past, some 11 programs have been tested by the CCF and been turned into regular programs. Thank you. Madam Chair, I don't think he has answered my question, so you will have to press the button again and wait for your next turn. Dr. Fernando Zhang, Madam Chair, for this particular post, as we asked last time, well, he's responsible for passing on certain messages on a regular basis. So from my point of view, he's mainly serving as a messenger. I don't intend to pass any insult on the person holding the post. So I'm mainly referring to Mr. Au Yang, who is the incumbent PAS, but then I'm concerned whether or not this individual will be able to fully play his role as the PAS. And if you were to consult the public, and you're only doing it twice a year, and if the CCF is so mindful of the community thinking, then you should not be sitting back and waiting for people to come forward to give you their views. And if you're only doing it twice, and then you just ignore their views for the rest of the time, and you're also citing the example of the living allowance for low-income carers of persons with disabilities as an example. Well, I have to say that we've been saying that for several years, and yet you've turned a deaf ear to that. And now in introducing this allowance for the carers, well, we've been telling you that, well, for the care of the elders and those with disabilities, the situation is very similar, because the problem is very similar and the need is also very similar. For persons taking care of the disabled, in fact, the number of years might be even longer, and yet you have taken years before you were prepared to listen to our views, and still you're insisting that you listen to public views. So I'm sorry, I don't see that. Okay, so the post has been in place, or you're proposing to continue it for another 5 years. So in terms of consultation with the public, in terms of listening to the views of the disadvantaged, what improvements will be made? Yes, PAS. Please be brief. Well, in terms of public consultation, well, that's one of the arrangements. There are other channels available for us to collect views of the public as to whether or not it should be done twice a year and what form it should take. We can consider it further. Well, what other forms? Well, you will have to wait for your next round. Next, Mr. Lau Kok Fan, 4 minutes, please. Well, Madam Chair, actually, I would like to pursue further on public consultation and also for programs to be continued and so on. Okay, just now you said that you would be listening to views, but then on what basis would you be determining on whether or not a certain suggestion should be adopted, or whether or not for the programs to be rolled out in the coming year, which programs should be selected? So, what criteria will be adopted? Should it be that it has received majority support or what? So, when you are trying to make up for the shortfall of government policies, there should be a basis for you to do so. And there are different disadvantaged groups in the community. So on what basis are you going to determine which suggestion is better and which programs should be rolled out? PAS. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, the purpose of the consultation is to allow the stakeholders and the public to express their views to us so that we'll be able to know the views of a particular group with a certain background so that the task force will be able to take on board their views. In fact, the task force will be discussing this on its own, and it would also be inviting relevant departments and policy bureaus to look at the suggestions together. For example, the workability, the operability of such suggestions, and so on. So first, we obtain the views, and we would listen to both sides of the story, and then we will decide. Okay, you said that other than the 2 public consultation sessions a year, you would also be going to different forums to collect views. But then what I'd like to stress is that even for this council, there are different lawmakers making different suggestions on what welfare programs or social programs would be needed. So after conducting the public consultation, what are you going to do? For example, from certain disadvantage, if they say that they have this need, would you be very proactive in rolling out programs to help them? Indeed, within the task force, we also have a wide spectrum of representatives from different quarters of the community, and they know very well certain disadvantaged groups. They might have direct contacts with them. And therefore, through members, we would be talking to different groups and also those with special needs to see what we can do to help them.
We will collect views from them. We will also be inviting different stakeholders to attend focus groups to discuss designated subjects and to tell us or advise us on how CCF can help them. Also, there will be public consultations. There will be also views coming through emails and letters and so on. Thank you. There has been less donations from the business sector, but then we still have a balance of around $20 billion in the fund. So if the post is going to be retained, I hope that more can be done in relation to public consultation and discussions with the stakeholders. I see that you have worked very hard to launch over 10 programs which are ongoing, but I believe that there are still proposals which are being put forward by the community. I hope that you can expedite your work in launching new programs, and this is our expectation on you. DS, yes, understand. We will continue with doing the best job. The 4th round, Dr. Kwakaki, 2 minutes. Madam Chair, I have 2 simple questions. One is policy. The dental care service. For a long time, the government has not been providing adequate dental care to the elderly people and also the PWDs. Now it's being taken up by the CCF. But then the CCF has been, doing badly with the service. The Audit Commission has said that the administration costs are higher than the service costs, and they're not implementing really practicable measures. So can you tell us what the CCF is going to do to improve on the situation? And also, there are regular programs now being implemented by the government. And also, you said the task force will report to the electrical on a half-yearly basis. And if we're talking about regular programs, then these programs are being monitored by the electrical. But the CCF is now really bypassing the electrical. Now, I have a particular question on the dental care service. Do you have any new programs to take care of the dental needs of the elderly people and the people with disabilities? Now, for dental service, when it was first offered, then there were certain fixed costs involved. And as more people join the program, the fixed cost will be shared out by a larger number of people. So that's why we are seeing higher costs at the initial stage. Now, for the service targets of the dental service, now, because there is a limit to the number of dental clinics joining the program, so we have promised that starting from July this year, the eligible age will be lowered to 70. I'm also asking about your long-term measures. The CCF will launch pilot programs. As for long-term policy, then that has to be considered by the relevant bureaus. Dr. Fernando Zhang, the fifth round. Madam Chair, you said that you would conduct focus groups. How many focus groups have been conducted in the past year, and on what subjects? DS. I have to give you the information later. I don't have the information on hand. Task force members will talk to their organizations they are familiar with. I'm talking about this PAS, the AOSGC, who the post. I mean, how many focus groups will he conduct? Can I defer to the PAS to take that question? Different groups at different times will reflect their views towards, and based on the needs, we will also arrange for the chairman of the task force to meet with the community groups. How many focus groups have you conducted in the past year, and on what subjects? This is a very straightforward question. Can you provide a written reply after the meeting? Yes. Two more members would like to ask the questions. Dr. Kwakaki, fifth round. Madam Chair, my question will be brief. For the have-nots, they have worked on it for so many years. The government will care for them sometime and not care for them at other times. Can you draw up a long-term policy for the have-nots? You repeatedly said that you're trying out the various pilot programs before you come up with a long-term policy. Well, can you tell me concretely what are you going to do? DS. The task force has discussed this, and we think that this kind of one-off grant, which dovetails with the proposals in the budget, may not be a very good measure. So they are in fact discussing different other measures to help different community groups. Like what? Say they have. We're talking about the have-nots, the low-income grassroots. They come from different backgrounds. So for these different low-income groups, we may draw up different measures, say financial grant and subsidy. So, Madam Chair, can they be more specific? Can they put that down in writing? Because when the proposal gets to the FC, we will want to know what measures you have to help these people, low-income people with different backgrounds. Dr. Fernando Zhang's sixth round. Well, before he speaks, I would like to say that late last night, we have received a series of questions from Mr. Eddie Ju, and the questions have been circulated to members. Mr. Ju has not arrived yet, and I hope that the administration can make a detailed response to these questions after the meeting. Dr. Zhang, sixth round. Madam Chair, on the the cancellation of the living subsidy to the have-nots. Well, I'm sure this is very controversial, and for this AO in the CCF, he should know about this. How come that there was no public consultation whatsoever before the subsidy was cancelled? For this AO in the cancellation of the subsidy to have-nots, what role has he played? Diaz, can you answer that question? For this living subsidy to have-nots, this is a one-off short-term relief measure for a particular year. And there is no question of cancellation. It's just that for the past 3 years, and short-term relief measures have been set out in the budget. So that's why we have the subsidy to have-nots. So, and in recent years, because there are not so many short-term relief measures in the budget, so there's no subsidy to have-nots. Well, all of the CCF programs are not regular programs, right? Well, if they are regular programs, they should not have been under the CCF. Well, don't resort to sophistry here. And you've been carrying out it for a number of years, and you stop it. So you call it suspension or what? It doesn't matter. But you are suspending such an important measure. Why haven't you conducted any public consultation? What role has this position played in all these? Diaz, do you have anything to add? No, nothing further from me. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, first round, 5 minutes. CCF. The setting up of the CCF is really to plug the gaps in existing service. Well, that stems from the fact that there are, say, shortfalls in the CSSA system. So there are bound to be some sort of gaps in our safety net system. So CCF is supposed to plug the gaps. And it's like some sort of a personal banking account of a certain group, and they can do whatever they like with the fund. Maybe the Leung supporters will make certain proposals and they can proceed with them. And this is a way to circumvent the existing system. All right, well, let's not talk about it. Say we want to prescribe a certain medication for a certain patient. Now the patient has taken the medicine for 3 years. And you said that we're not prescribing the same drugs to other patients, so we'll stop prescribing this medicine. But these other patients are prescribed other medicine, so if the person's not prescribed the same medicine, he would die, right? So we're talking about the setting up, creation of this AOSGC, supernumerary posts. You can't give good justifications. Mr. Lo Chi Kwang is supposed to be the secretary. Shortly, I've known him for some 30 years. He's getting worse and worse as a person. He doesn't have any sense of empathy at all for other people. He said, Mr. Leung, sorry, in the past 2 years, we have tried to pay an extra monthly rental for people, for the tenants of PRH. So they're not giving this anymore. But then these people are actually within the safety net already. So the system was supposed to help those who are not covered by the safety net. So you are telling me that, well, since we're not treating those in the safety net well, then we might as well not be so kind to those outside the safety net. So I think you've got the wrong name. The CCF, well, is a non-caring fund, indeed, or rather. Mrs. Yip? Well, they are just using a band-aid approach, but then they still are not prescribing the right medication to the right people. 10 years ago, together with Fernando Zheng, well, at that time, Carrie Lam was stationed in the UK, and we talked about social inclusion in foreign jurisdictions. People, they have measures to help people outside the safety net. Well, not just giving them money, but actually offering jobs to them as well. Well, but we are, doing it the other way around. We are heading towards the exclusion route. If you're not helping people, well, you shouldn't be hurting people. Well, you are doing nothing with your fund. So those who are following the debate here live, well, listen up. Well, do you treat these people as human beings? You are, well, treating them so badly. So how can we give you money? I'm still going to continue taking you to task on all these. Well, so you're objecting to the proposal. Yes, I am against it, all against it. Do you want a response from the DS? DS, any response? Well, you can't say 1 + 1 = 2, wrong, right? Next one, Mr. Dr. Kwokaki, 6th round. 1 minute. Madam Chair, let me cite a very embarrassing example. Well, patients don't have the means to buy drugs. They should have been cured, but then they pass away. And then the government and the HA are turning a blind eye to it, and they're covered by the CCF. And when they come to the late stage of their life, they are begging for CCF to give them money to get them the right drugs. Well, this is all the problem with the drug formulary of the HA. Well, tell me, when will you make amends to this problem with the drug formulary, or will you continue with your very merciless approach that people have to come to beg you for money to get the medicine? CCF may not, well, will only give money when some people have already passed away. So DS, what's your response? The latest program from CCF is that starting from August, we will be subsidizing eligible patients to get ultra expensive drugs. And during the operation of this program, we will be asking the HA to study how extra or ultra expensive drugs will be incorporated into the Samaritan Fund or other safety net.
So you do agree that the system has been a total failure and is very corrupted when it comes to the procurement of super expensive drugs. Well, that's the whole idea. That is, we will try to test out with certain approach, and if it's successful, then we would regularize that. So you're actually aiding and abetting in this murder. Do you know that? Well, in fact, the fund has been working very hard by resorting to different means to help the disadvantaged. Okay. Next, Lam Kwok Hong. All right, this is done on a matching fund basis. Okay, the administration has already injected $20 billion, but how much have you been able to raise from the business sector? So you've only managed to get some 9%. So the business sector has only injected $1.8 billion. So it has been proven a failure. So you should have introduced higher tax. So you should have penalized them, because they are not prepared to do it. All right, the administration has injected $20 billion. You should have punished them by making them pay $20 billion. And in fact, well, the Poverty Alleviation Act was introduced in the UK during Queen Victoria I era. So that was many years ago. And now you fail in your policy, and now when you try to do it by way of a matching fund, you've also failed. So what is going to happen? Second, on the issue of medication, all right, both Fernando Zheng and I have been having meetings with the victims, and I remember on that occasion we had meeting until 8 o'clock in the evening, and we were told that the CCF would be looking into it. But then what has come out of it? So when it goes to the administration is again a toothless tiger, because the CCF has been under the control of a group of people, and they are totally detached from the real world. So it's not there to help those in need. So it's like putting out a fire. You are not there to put out the fire. The family members have been crying, and they've been saying that if they are denied the drugs, they could die. And one lady who was speaking here in this very room, in this very same room, well, she passed away already after that meeting. So if you're able to help people, it's like putting out a fire. It's very important. And even if you're not a medical doctor, then you should have control the doctors. And if you're able to determine what kind of medication is prescribed by a doctor to help the patient, then you should be there to help. So what kind of community care is this? Apparently, you have adopted a totally hands-off approach. All right, you said that people would have a chance to criticize you, but then we would not have a chance to do it, because if I get hold of you outside this building, and if I criticize you, then I could be charged for contempt of this council. So what can I do? So I only have these 10 odd minutes to scold you. So I make it clear that I'm here to scold you, to criticize you. So on standard working hours, I think the administration's proposal would be even worse than that for minimum wage. So there is no timetable, there is no roadmap. What are you doing? $11,000. So for the minimum working pay is $34.5 an hour. So what kind of policy is that? So you try to sound great, and yet when it comes to real action, it's nothing. So just look at standard working hours. We are enraged because every day when we take public transport to here, well, even before we arrive, we are getting angry. So when you disclose the information, can you make it later instead of doing it in the early morning? We can't even have our breakfast properly. So just imagine how many people who have heard you talk about standard working hours. Well, for workers, they would be very enraged. They couldn't even have a bowl of noodles for breakfast. So for those who are concerned about the grassroots, well, apparently you're treating them as if they are getting endowment from you, and you can always take back what you have offered to them. So what kind of approach or help is that? Next, UC Wing, 5 minutes. Sorry, Madam Chair, I was at another meeting. That's why I'm not sure if this question has been asked by other members already. That's about the administration's information paper. Because they say that during the past few years, well, concerning donations from different quarters of the community, I can see a significant drop year after year. Well, from 11-12, they managed to get $470 million, and then by 2015 and 16, they only managed to get about $1 million. And then by 2016-17, you have only been able to get about $70,000 so far. So this why has it become like that? Is it because the administration has been making injections into the funds? So in terms of encouraging public donations or public involvement, you have not been working so hard. So what's the government's policy on this? If that's the policy, if you're not going to encourage the community to make donations to the fund, and if there aren't that many people who are prepared to make donations to the fund, then the situation of the fund will not be that good. Is that the case? Yes, PAS. Well, as I explained earlier, well, the fund was set up in 2011, and initially there were large sums of commitments or donations, and initially they said that they would be making donations in stages. That's why during the first few years, well, in 2010 to 2014-15, during those few years, you can see that there were larger sums of donations, and they promised to make those donations in stages. Yes, even though we still have people who are prepared to make donations, the fund has not taken any initiative to invite public donations. And of course, we do welcome the public to support this fund. And we have also promised that this subject can be brought back to the task force so that there can be further discussions by the task force on whether or not and how they can be more proactive in terms of raising funds from the community. All right, for the more passionate people, they are prepared to make donations to the fund. So can you adjust the nature of the fund so that you can get better response from the community, or would you be just begging them for donations, because I can see that there are compassionate people who are willing to make donations on a regular basis, and they have seen that the administration has already injected substantial amounts of funds into the fund, and therefore they do not have to do the same. And therefore, will you be able to do something more in line with the needs of the community? And for this group of charitable persons, they can also make contribution through other means. Who is to answer the question? Well, concerning the operation of the fund as to how it can get further donations from the community, well, as I said, the task force will be invited to consider this so that there can be further discussions by the task force on this. All right, the person in charge of this, does he have the responsibility to raise funds, or is it that he would not be considering other ways and means of raising funds? Yes, permanent. Yes, DS. Well, for the Secretariat or the PAS, he will be collecting and collating information for the discussion by the task force, and in accordance with the discussion of the task force, he will also be executing the decisions of the task force. Chairman, given the fact that you have this post for 5 years, I think this individual can also look into this. Given the shrinking of the size of donations, well, it's not that you don't have the resources, it's about how hard you're going to work on it. And if you have the resources and you also have the post available, then you should try to make it clear to the individual holding the post that he should set this as one of his targets. So for the $400 million a year from donations, I think the funds should be used on other revenues, or in terms of the scope of application of the fund, it should be widened. But nobody would say no to more funds and more use of such funds on the disadvantage. You should be more flexible, right? We will be looking into that, Madam Chair. Well, Mr. Eddie Chu has arrived, and he has written in and raised a series of questions, but then some of them have been asked many times by different members. For example, donation from the business sector, how come it's so little? And also, what about dental services? What is going to happen to them? And also for the and have-nots, well, that has been asked many times too. So if you want the officials to answer all the questions, well, I don't think we have enough time for that, because we still have 8 more items to discuss. All right, Eddie Chu, you asked the CCF and also the attendance rate by individual members of the task force. I think you will have to do that in writing. Yes. Okay. With regard to future work reports, well, you can answer that later. So it's about looking into the future. So can you answer that later? So Mr. Eddie Chu, can you ask questions that have not been asked? Well, Madam Chair, the reason why I put that in writing, that's because I like to save time. That's the reason why I've put out 10 questions here. So is it my turn now? Please ask questions that have not been asked. Well, for elderly service and also dental services and also donations from the business sector, I think those have been asked many times. So please do select those that have not yet been asked by any member. What about the website? Because there is a column on review reports on support programs, but then from what I've seen, well, for dental services and also special care living allowance for carers of the disabled, well, the report was published in 2013, so has that been updated during the past couple of years? And the next question that I'd like to ask is, for the special care allowance for the seriously disabled, well, I can see that in 2013 there were 198 cases that were rejected and 115 cases whereby the household income exceeded the limit and they were rejected. Well, for the seriously disabled, well, they would have greater need for more expenses. So for the criteria for this, there might be a need for relaxation. So that's the report in 2013. So have you changed your practice since then? Yes. All right. Initially, it was to be run until September 2016, but now it has been extended, and according to our long-standing practice, well, before the end of the program, there would definitely be a report, but then for the interim, we'll be looking at the progress of the program. Well, normally we would wait until after the expiry of the program, we will have the report, and then we will upload it on the website, and if that's not uploaded yet, it means that the report has not come out yet. In 2013, you already felt that for the seriously disabled, they would have greater need for expenses. That's why the eligibility criteria might need to be relaxed. So, have there been any changes since then? So, has there been any progress? Yes. Well, to be more specific about the arrangements, I'm not in a position to answer because since 2013, it's been several years. So can you provide a reply in writing? Yes. So as a matter of principle, for example, after you have done the interim review report, well, you have already identified some problems. So would you be taking action immediately so as to change it? Or do you have to wait till after the completion of the program before you would conduct a further review? Because you have already identified issues where you can make improvements. So have you done that already? Well, as a matter of principle, as I just said, well, upon the completion of the program, definitely there would be reports, but then there might be pilot schemes whereby we are trying to test out certain ideas, and we'd like to collect further information by implementing certain programs, and there would be interim reviews. And of course, the principle is that after the interim review, if we are able to deal with certain problems within the short term, then that would be done. So even if we are just we are still in the middle of the program, we would be prepared to discuss it, but then as to the specific item that the honourable member just referred to, we will have to go back and see. But then for the performance pledge to the community, you said that there would be an interim review, and then if you have specific ideas, then you would be implementing those immediately. Is that the performance pledge by the administration? Is that a pledge? Yes. Well, yes. That's the direction that has been taken by the task force, because we are trying to introduce pilot programs, and if we are able to identify problems in the interim, and if we are able to make improvements, and if operationally is feasible, then we'll be prepared to do it. That's the principle. I'll be following up for later. Next, Mr. Luk Chung Hong. Madam Chair, as we all know, well, the wealth gap in Hong Kong is very big, and according to the latest figure of the Gini coefficient is 0.539, is the highest in 45 years. And the administration has been saying that in terms of welfare spending in the past few years, that has gone up by 50%.
After taxation and social benefits, the rate is only 0.437. So it seems that the government is satisfied with its own work. Well, CCF is under HAB and not LWB, but then LWB should be the main bureau for doing poverty alleviation work. The CCF is independent of LWB. Will it be the case that it holds different views from LWBs on certain issues? Let me cite an example. Now, the government would normally say the Gini coefficient will drop after taxation and also social benefits. Well, for the middle class and the rich people, their investment return may take up a big proportion of their income, and these don't have to be declared. Say, for example, investment on stocks and properties and so on. And has the government taken into account all these and come up with another sort of Gini coefficient? And how does the CCF view that kind of situation, the wealth gap? The CCF is there to provide supplementary services, but on the poverty situation, you should have your own overall objective perspective. And for this post of the PAS, he is responsible for coordinating government departments and also liaise with stakeholders, collect public views, and so on. So how does the CCF assess the overall poverty problem in Hong Kong? Since you are independent of the LWB, would you have different views from theirs? And as a result, come up with corresponding measures to help with the situation. Now for the and have not fund. Well, we have passed a cross-political party motion asking for something to be done. How come that the CCF is turning a blind eye to our request and is not doing anything? We have asked a lot of questions about and have nots. I would like to hear their response on whether CCF has its own view on the poverty situation in Hong Kong. Now, CCF is under the Commission on Poverty for, say, macro poverty issues and how to deal with the situation. Well, this is something that the COP has been working on all along, and CCF is in the form of a fund, so more flexibility can be allowed to help designated groups in the community. So, and they are rolling out specific assistance programs to help different community groups with different backgrounds. So the poverty situation is discussed not only at the task force, but also at the COP level. And CCF is rolling out programs concrete programs to help. Now we talk about FHB, EDB, LWB. They do have representatives on the task force, and we are there to discuss all these issues together. Madam Chair, I want to follow up on the Gini coefficient issue. The task force, have you considered that the Gini coefficient should be higher? Because the government has never taken into account the investment returns of the middle class. Why? There are so much public grievances in the community because there is such a wide wealth gap, and the CCF should do something about this. And if you don't come up with an objective assessment of the situation, I'm worried that the programs that CCF embarks on will not be the right programs. Well, I think the Gini coefficient is a rather broad issue. I think it goes beyond our present discussion. Yes, do you have any response? The member is concerned about the poverty situation, the Gini coefficient, and these issues have actually been discussed thoroughly at the DOB, and the CCF, being part of the COP, will work together with the COP to provide cash assistance programs. I think this is a very academic discussion. Maybe we need some statistician to help us out. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong. Well, the person who will get an extension of 5 years, is he here? Well, he's not here. He should come here and attend this meeting. Well, regard it as a job interview for him. Well, it's him here, Mr. Nick Aoyang. You didn't answer questions. How can we give you money? So you should answer our questions. You haven't stopped your scolding? You talk about COP all the time. COP was set up by Carrie Lam. And it's a sort of play toy of Carrie Lam to showcase her strengths, so to speak. And the CCF is under pressure. And the Carrie Lam used to be the chief secretary, and she will be very soon the chief executive. And then Matthew Leung came from the LWB, and the HAB was supposed to is managing the CCF, and there is no communication between the two bureaus. It should be Chung Tak Sing who should take care of this, but then he was fired by 689. Who claimed that he had a family issue, whereas in fact that didn't exist. And then we got someone else in his place. Or Lau Kong Wah, he could actually regenerate dead cells. So Mrs. Regina Yip, she has served as a government officer for so many years, and now she's sitting here. And if she wanted to get some papers on Mr. Aoyang's desk, and she would be accused of contempt for the legislature, and so on. Matthew Zhang used to be the permanent secretary, and he was rising upwards so quickly, and it's because of the collapse of the system. And also Mr. Xiu, standard working hours. He wasn't even embarrassed by presenting his proposal. He claimed that he protecting the interest of the workers. And the labor sector would not agree to that proposal. Mr. Wong Kok-kin was being criticized now. And they said that because of your withdrawal from the committee, and that's why we are ending up in this proposal. So, Mr. Lang, your time's up. Dr. Fernandez, your 7th round. So please don't repeat your question or comments. I won't repeat myself. I would like to thank Mr. Eddie Ju for raising this issue on the special care allowance for the severely handicapped. The DS just now said that the CCF is listening to views all the time, but over the years, the community has raised views on this allowance, and they said that the allowance should not be just limited to those under 60. Those over 60 should also benefit. The DS, what's your response to that request? How come that you have not heeded the views over the years? How come that the eligibility age is set at 60? DS or PAS? For this item, why we set the age at 60? Because for those age 60 or above now, there are other services provided to these people by the SWT. Well, please explain. For those severely handicapped people aged over 60, what services or subsidies are available to them from the SWT? For those aged 60, they have the community care services, and there are other support services provided by the SWT. We are talking about cash allowance here, ranging from $1,000 to $2,000 depending on their income level. But then, for those aged 60 to 65 and over 65, are they given any cash allowance? They are non-CSSA recipients. Now, let me add, apart from this item, there are other CCF programs related to PWD. So when we roll out these programs, we would review the support measures for the PWDs as a whole. I don't get his logic. The cash allowance is for people who are severely handicapped and they need 24-hour care service. And there are 3 tiers depending on their income level. The highest get $2,000. The lowest amount is $1,000. But then this age limit of 60 makes it impossible for those aged 60 or below to get the allowance. And how come that over the years they have not heeded to our advice? Are there any special difficulties? Any specific answer? Okay, put it in writing. Well, if there are other cash allowances, please list them out, because I've never heard of anything like that. All right, first round, Dr. Helena Wong. CCCF was established in 2011 and has been 6 years down the road, and we are to retain this post. We expect that the government can conduct an overall review of the CCF works in the past 6 years, assess their performance so that we can decide on whether we support the retention of this post. But the paper is silent on such an overall review. So can the government provide such information before it gets to the FC? And there are, in the past 6 years, 36 assistance programs were launched. Is it the case that some of them have been suspended or have been regularized? And if yes, how many have been incorporated into the government's regular assistance programs? How many have been suspended? And we are now left with 18 ongoing programs, right? And do you have figures to share with us on the situation? Yeah, well, CCF is there to plug the gaps in the system for people who are not covered by, say, the safety net or CSSA and so on. And will the CCF continue to do that? And would you consider, say, regularizing more programs in the future? So can you give me all these figures? DS, since the establishment of the CCF, we have launched 44 programs. While the paper was drafted in April, now the figure is a bit different. 11 programs, after the pilot trial, have been incorporated into government's regular assistance programs, involving an annual recurring expenditure of about $700 million. And for other programs, pilot programs, well, they have been suspended. Ongoing programs, 18, and 8 are newly approved programs. And, well, in fact, very soon, 26 programs will be ongoing programs. So can the government give us the names of all these programs and the amount involved? The 8 programs, or no, the 11 regular programs, a number have been suspended, some will be newly added. What are these programs and the amount involved? Can all the information be given to us? We have given you the information before. Well, we can give you a list later on again. For those programs suspended, what are these programs? And the reasons for their suspension. Can I defer to the PAS? PAS, please. There are 7 suspended programs for subsidy for elderly and private housing, subsidizing students or in overseas study programs and competing overseas, and for providing subsidy for those inadequately housed.
And comprehensive care for those living in a community, and also cleaning service and escort service for those elders living in a community, and also a one-off item so that for the living allowance for the working poor, so that there would be one-off special allowance for those children from these families, and also for the one-off living allowance for those who are not on CSSA. And normally after the program, there would be a review on how the program was received, and there might also be some one-off programs, for example, for the living allowance for the working poor, for the one-off special textbook allowance for the students from these families. That was a one-off measure. That's why after the living allowance for the working poor was rolled out, it was scrapped. And also for the school-based fund for students to go overseas for learning and so on. Well, that's been handed over to the Quality Education Fund, and according to some schools, the work was rather cumbersome. That's why they might not have felt that this is the most appropriate way of going about this matter. All right, he's quick in reading out from the list, and only if we can have the paper will we be able to ask follow-up questions. So we can see that for provisional care or occasional care for children and so on. Well, what's the reason for scrapping these programs? We haven't heard the reason properly. So can you prepare the paper and give the list to us? So there are so many programs which can stay and which have to be scrapped, which have been made regular programs, so that it can come under the the recurrent expenditure of the administration, so we can have a better idea as to the work of the CCF, what good things it has done, and what needs to be continued. Okay, so DS, can you come up with a table? And also for the 8 new programs to be rolled out, can you also include the information of those 8 programs in your paper? Yes, please. Next, Dr. Helena Wong asking for the second time. Yes, under item 6 of the paper, well, in 2016 there were 6 new items or programs, and some were very new, and they were only rolled out in 2017. But what about those started in 2016? For example, for the free cervical cancer vaccination pilot scheme, in fact, it was rolled out in October 2016. So it's been more than half a year now. So how many people have registered under that program? Well, do you have the information, DS? Well, yes. For the free cervical cancer vaccination pilot scheme, as at April this year, for those who have made appointments, we have 7,880 persons, and 1,118 have already received the vaccination. Okay. What about the rest? A, B, C, D, and E. Do you have the relevant figures? Can you also give us a table setting out the figures? Do you have the figures with you? Well, can I read that out very briefly? So you'll be doing cursory reading again. All right, I'll be reading that out more slowly. Okay, for kindergarten students, one-off schooling allowance, well, that was done in the end of April. 41,000 people benefiting from that. And for the cervical cancer vaccination, I've already read that out. As to the disregarded earnings for recipients with disabilities under the CSSA. Initially, some 3,342 people benefited with regard to pilot scheme on providing subsidy for higher disability allowance recipients in paid employment to hire carers, or some 23,000 people benefited. As to the pilot scheme on living allowance for low-income carers or persons with disabilities, as at end of April, 1,042 people benefiting from that. With regard to community support scheme for dementia, well, that was only introduced in April, so only 74 people have applied, and for the rest, we're still processing the applications. Thank you. Okay, under item D, pilot scheme on providing subsidy for higher disability allowance recipients in paid employment to hire carers. So you're hiring carers to take care of them. So I'd like to know, how come there were only 23 people registering? Because initially, how many people did you expect to come forward to use such services? Well, Madam Chair, in fact, that scheme was intended for those under HAA, so they are rather severely handicapped. Initially, we expected about 100 people to come forward. But then it was only introduced for some 6 months, and we still haven't got the latest figure. As I said, for the 23 people, that's at the end of April. I'd like to ask the administration this. All right, you're talking about people on HAA. Okay, you're trying to help them to hire carers to take care of them. But then the premise is that they would have to be in paid employment. If they are already severely handicapped, then how can you expect them to be employed and receiving pay? Well, precisely, the scheme is to assist these rather severely handicapped so that they can get employment. That's why the purpose of the scheme is that when these people can hire carers to help them with their transport and mobility, or they can also take care of their needs while at work. So precisely because of this, the target recipients would be more severely handicapped. That's why we try to encourage them so that they can find jobs. So you're suggesting that despite the fact that they are severely handicapped, they are still able to work. So how many people have you expected to be eligible? Well, initially we expected that about 100 people would be eligible. So you will have to step up publicity so that more people would come forward to help them. Yes, we will do that. Next, Leung Kwok Hong. asking for the fourth time. Yes, Madam Chair, coming back to the subject. Okay, they are asking for funding for the post to be continued so that the service of the fund can continue. That's the theme of it. But then I do not see how it can survive because there are 11 items. Okay, out of 44, they have 11 items that have been run for more than 3 years and they are turned permanent programs or regular programs, and then 15 have been scrapped, and then 18 would continue, and 8 are new programs. In other words, they have 26 programs now. So, for an administration to be short of the determination to resolve the problem of poverty, that's why we have this fund. I think the name of the fund was wrong. It shows that in our community is a dysfunctioning community. That's the reason why if we were to give them fund to continue the post for another 5 years, then what if Carrie Lam said that is to be scrapped after she took office? Then what is going to happen to you, Mr. Aoyang? Alright, this fund is not working and we have not been able to match government injection with business donations. Then what is going to happen to you? So is it that you'll be dismissed right away? And will the post be scrapped right away? Yes. Well, as we said last time, if you're looking at the fund, as I said earlier on, there are some 44 programs, and we're talking about 18 plus 8 right now. We expect that these programs will at least continue until 2025. And we still have about $20 billion left in the fund, and therefore we are quite confident that for a very long time to come, that is, in the next few years, the fund will continue to operate. That's why there is a need for us to extend this post to continue to monitor the operation of the fund, because by 30th of June this year, the post will lapse. Without this person, will the fund have to close down? So will that be the effect if this post is not approved? Well, Madam Chair, as I said, because we're talking about a very substantial fund, and the work will also involve coordinating with different bureaus and departments, and if we do not have a directorate post to look after the work of the fund, we believe that that's very undesirable, because the bureau simply will not be able to make use of existing resources to deal with the work of that post. Okay? Are there any other members who have not been able to ask questions yet? If not, then I'll put this to the vote. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against please raise their hands. Do we have to claim a division? No, no need. Sorry, can you raise your hands again? Will those in favor please raise your hands? Those against please raise your hands. Okay, I declare that the yes have it. Do we need to have it singled out for separate voting at the FC? Alright. Okay, so it will be singled out for separate voting at the FC. Second item. So is Transport and Housing Bureau. So is the proposed creation of one non-civil service position of Chief Inspector of Accidents in the Transport branch of the Transport and Housing Bureau for about 3 years, and is pegged at D2 and is to operate until the 30th of March 2020. So it's for 3 years to lead an independent air accident investigation authority. And on the 27th of March this year, the Economic Development panel was consulted, and with us today we have the Permanent Secretary for the Bureau, Mr. Joseph Lai, and also Mr. Wallace Lau, Deputy Secretary for the Bureau, and Captain Victor Liu, Deputy Director General of Civil Aviation, and Mr. Alan Shum, Assistant Director General for Civil Aviation. And as the Chairman of the Economic Development Bureau, Mr. Jeffrey Lam is not here, so I'll be setting out the discussion of the panel in a summary today. And at the meeting of the panel held on the 27th of March this year, there was a discussion on the proposed creation of this non-permanent post for 3 years which is the Chief Inspector of Accidents. He will head the Independent Air Accident Investigation Authority as recommended by the ICAO. Well, members were in general support of the setting up of the Independent Investigation Authority, but then a member wondered whether or not there is this need, and also given the small number of air accidents, some members were also concerned whether or not the workload would be sufficient to support the creation of this post, and some members were also of the view that given the nature of air accidents, it's difficult to project the workload of that authority, and therefore the members asked the administration to further consider the manning requirements. So we have several members. Mr. Lau Kok Fan, 5 minutes, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, the administration is proposing to set up this independent air accident investigation authority, and as you said, that's the new requirement of the ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. All right, the existing arrangement is that the CAD would be under the Transport and Housing Bureau. So my question is, well, given the establishment of the new authority, and you also said that the Director General of the CAD would be taking up that post, and he might also second staff to that authority, and the workload might be too heavy. So my question is, with the independent authority set up, basically, what's the biggest difference from asking the CAD to do it, other than the manpower implications? Mr. Joseph Lai, let me answer the question first before I defer to my colleagues. Well, basically, this suggestion is to serve a purpose, and that is to meet the requirement of the ICAO, so that we can have an independent air accident investigation authority which is independent from the government. And the current situation is that, well, where there are air accidents or serious incidents, then the investigation would be conducted by the CAD, even though for many years the CAD has been very professional in conducting such investigations. It has been very impartial, but then it might be a perception problem, because the CAD itself, to a certain extent, is also a service provider, and therefore in serious incidents or even accidents which might involve whether or not the work of the CAD might be involved, and that might give people the impression that if the CAD were to conduct the investigation itself, it might be investigating into its own work. Well, I have emphasized that the CAD has been very professional and impartial in conducting its investigations in the past, but then given the fact that this is the latest requirement of the ICAO, to avoid the impression that there might be conflicts of interest,
and there may be also some problems with the perception that there may be a conflict of interest. So that's why if we have this independent authority which is reporting directly to the THB, and this is independent of the CAD, then the problems of perception that I mentioned can be avoided. So that's the major purpose of this. Now, this is international requirement. Is it the case that in other jurisdictions and such independent authorities are set up outside of their civil aviation authorities? Yes, Madam Chair. This is an international trend, and as said in the paper, say in the UK, France, and other countries, the body responsible for investigating into accident is independent of the department which is equivalent to the CAD in Hong Kong. Like Hong Kong, and civil aviation authorities in overseas jurisdictions are providers of different aviation services. So in other countries, they have an independent investigative authority, right? Yes, this is the requirement of the ICAO. At the panel meeting, some members were asking why there is this, why the body should be a permanent one. Why are there so many people needed? Now, if there are several incidents involving the CAD, will this authority in the future, apart from looking into the causes of accidents, make recommendations for improvements? Madam Chair. This is also a requirement of the ICAO, and that is after the investigation, recommendations for improvements should be made. So this is very, very different from, say, like the criminal investigations of the police or civil investigations involving civil claims. No, that's different. So can we say appoint a authority whenever an incident happens, and that we would not establish a permanent body? No. After accidents or serious incidents have happened, well, the authority should start work at once. It's just like whenever there is a murder case, the police have to be on site in the first instance. So if we only appoint a body after accidents have happened, then we will be missing the time, and maybe the important evidence cannot be collected. So that's why we need a permanent establishment. And actually, this is a small scale body, and we say that we would give it a try for 3 years, and after that we will conduct a review, and then we will report on our review to the LegCo. Again, we have received Mr. Eddie G's email at 8:06 a.m. this morning. He has sent in 5 questions. Maybe I would circulate the questions to the administration and the members. Dr. Kwakaki, first round, 5 minutes. I support the proposal, but still I have several questions. First, the greatest risk of CAD in the eyes of the public is the new air control traffic control system, because whenever there is incident relating to the ATMS, whether it's the computer and the transition and so on, we talk about this Raytheon system. We think that there's a big problem to it, and there may be a risk of serious accidents because of the system. So for the chief inspector of accidents in the future, will he review the present ATMS, whether there should be changes to the system? Second, there have been so many accidents recently. We've got the incident involving the China Eastern plane, and that has to do with the structure of the runway, and the plane went off the runway. So that has maybe have to do with the 3R system. So does the person have the responsibility to provide input to the setting to the 3RS system so that accidents can be prevented? Thirdly, 2 staff members will be redeployed or seconded to the office. I understand that, but for the other 4, what's the government's plan is? Should these 4 posts be filled by non-CAD staff so that we can instill greater confidence into the public? I agree that the body should be independent of the CAD. The PS talk about perception. I don't think it's just a matter of perception. I think that this is a real issue. I've been criticizing the IPCC and its sort of conflicting role with the capo of the police and so on. So for these 4 other positions, senior operations officers, should people from outside be brought in to fill this post so that we can enhance the credibility of the investigations in the future? Who to take the questions? For the accident involving the incident involving the skidding of the China Eastern plane, the CAD has defined it to be a serious incident. And since the new body has not been established, we are going by the established mechanism to deal with the incident. Well, depending on when the independent authority can be set up, If the investigation of that plane is still going on, then the incident of the China Eastern Plane will be taken up by the new independent authority. Well, irrespective of who will do the investigation, there will be recommendations made ultimately. And the recommendations will be mainly on how to prevent the recurrence of similar incidents in the future. And well, we'll see what specific proposals, recommendations will be made by the investigation body. I will not make any speculation on what the recommendations will be. Now, as to the scope of work for the authority, as explained in the paper, there are two aspects of work. First is they have to investigate into any accidents or serious incidents. Serious incidents mean that incidents which will easily lead to accidents. Well, accidents are accidents, that's easy to understand. But in the future, whether there will be accidents or serious incidents, this CIA, in accordance with the law, must conduct an investigation, and after that, a report has to be submitted to the CE, and the report will also be made public. There will be recommendations in the report on how to prevent recurrence of similar incidents. Dr. Kwok's third question. We think we will leave it up to the CIA after he has assumed his post to decide on whether he should opt, say, for secondment of people from CIA to fill the 4 posts, or someone from outside should be brought in. So we will leave it up to the CIA to decide on the way forward, depending on his own work needs, to bring in the right people he wants. Well, we appreciate Dr. Kwok's concern, so that's why we are leaving it up to the CIA to decide. Well, he hasn't answered my question on the ATMS and also the 3-runway system. Well, let's leave it till the next round. Mr. Jeremy Tam, first round. Madam Chair, I support the creation of this post on the CIA for the Independent Accident Investigation Authority. I think it's already, well, we are being too late in doing that. As what the administration said, the overseas jurisdictions are already doing this. And in Hong Kong, the CIA should report to the Secretary. Actually, in some overseas jurisdiction, the person will report to the President. There are a couple of questions here. First, I wonder how much information he can get for whatever incidents happening while the MOR should be submitted to the CAD. Now, after that is done, for whatever MORs that has been received by the CAD, this body will also receive the MOR. It's not the case that the CAD will hand the MOR to them. Is that the MOR will be submitted to them directly, right? And they can have they can take the initiative to investigate into whatever accidents or serious incidents they deem fit. Is this the case? P.S. please. You talked about the mandatory reports, the MOR. For these mandatory reports, MORs in the future, this will continue to be provided to the CAD. And then the CAD in the future will establish a mechanism with this independent authority to ensure that the authority can get these MORs, can learn about their contents. Now, as to the specific or detailed arrangements, I think we'll have to wait till the CIA assumes the post, and then he will discuss the matter with the CAD to come up with a communication mechanism which is practicable. Thank you. The gist is this. I hope that this investigation authority can get whatever MOR it likes. That's the crux of the matter. I strongly urge that that be done. He should know about all MORs, because one of the tasks is that he should collate and analyze such information and come up with recommendations. So he should have access to all the information needed. And also on enclosure 2, you define what is accidents and serious incidents. But the translation in Chinese is not very good. Well, in English, accidents is very self-explanatory, but serious incidents in Chinese is 严重事故. But then in Chinese, you term both as 事故, which don't seem right. So is it a typo, or what are you going to use the wordings that you've used now? Who to take the question? Mr. Tam, you're referring to Annex 2. In the supplementary paper, CB 4927 1617 bracket 02. You have come up with the ICAO's definitions of accidents and serious incidents. In English, they are very self-explanatory, but then in Chinese, you are using 事故 instead of 意外 for accidents. This is a supplementary paper provided to members. I believe that it might be a typo. In the English versions, it should be accidents. Yes, I believe it's an accidental mistake on your part. Well, I think it's the terms are very important to us, but in English, accidents and serious incidents, the difference is very clear. So I think it's just a typo. Can you change that when the paper gets to FC? Yes. And also recruitment. I would like to confirm that for the CIA, you would do recruitment worldwide, right? Yes. That's our plan. We would have a recruitment worldwide. We will not have any distinction as to the candidates on their background and race. Mr. Nathan Law, I welcome this proposal to create a post.
Because to make sure that the monitoring is effective, then we have to make sure that we would not be having the department investigating into its own work. And therefore, under the International Convention on Civil Aviation, that's the requirement by the ICAO. But then I have a question. Okay, other than the CIA, we also need to have professional investigators in order to set up that independent authority. But then apparently, 2 would be seconded from the CAD. But then as the Secretary also agreed, that is most people would have come from the CAD. So what about the setup of the authority? How many people would be seconded from the CAD? And how many people would be recruited by public recruitment? What I'd like to know is that ultimately, if all the investigators are seconded from the CAD without any experts or people recruited by open recruitment, then how can it be independent? So what's the overall establishment of the authority? Well, we're talking about 1 + 6 + 1. In other words, we have a CIA, and then there will be 6 investigators at different ranks, and then there'll be a supporting staff. So that's the overall establishment for the future independent authority for the 6 investigators as we have set up in the paper. initially there will be 2 colleagues who will be seconded from the CAD because they are working full-time at the CAD for accident investigation. So they will be seconded to the new authority once it's set up. Because if the authority were to start work right away, then we need to have the basic manning ratio. So other than the CIA, we also need to have at least 2 people to support him. For the remaining 4 investigators, as I briefly mentioned, there is a room for the CIA. After he has taken up his post, he will determine whether he'd like to second more people from a CAD on a short-term basis so that the authority will be able to start work right away, or would he like to recruit people from outside of the government to fill those posts. We are leaving that to the CIA who will decide. So can we also propose that the CIA should also be recruited by open recruitment? Yes, indeed, we plan to do that. So can I suggest that the CIA would be recruited by open recruitment? Well, we will be giving him that room to decide, but then in the end it's the CIA who will know best as to who he would need and where these people should come from, which is the most expeditious and most efficient. So I think we should leave it to the CIA to decide, but then indeed we have planned to allow him to make the decision. Okay, you plan to set up an independent authority so that you would avoid the situation whereby the CAD will be investigating into the CAD, but then other than the CIA, if everybody else is seconded from the CAD, then you will still be giving people the impression that you're just changing the shell of it without changing the substance. Okay, for the investigation on the incident, it would take on average 26 months. And after setting up the authority, do you have any plans to shorten the period of investigation, or do you have any target? So that after the authority is set up, you'll be able to compress the whole process. Well, I'll defer to Mr. Lam to help with the answer. Yes, Mr. Lam? Thank you. To answer Mr. Law's question, after the independent investigation authority is set up, the investigation period will be shortened. At present, the average time is 26 months for any accident. In future, I think that the investigation time will be shortened, but then I'm not able to give you the precise time because for every case, the time that will be needed will be different, and in some cases, we might need to take evidence from the third party or even fourth party. But then at least you can have an estimate so that you would at least have a target of shortening it by, say, 20 or 30%. Well, I have to emphasize that given the nature of individual incidents, we are not able to come up with an accurate estimate. But then I'm quite sure that we'll be able to shorten the investigation time. Yes, Mr. Martin Liao. Yes, the administration is to create this post because they'd like to set up an independent air accident investigation authority, which will be in line with the requirement of the ICAO. But then it's only for 3 years. And according to the paper, there should be some flexibility for the establishment of the authority to see if it's in line with the actual need. But then in order to meet the international obligation requirement, so this is going to be a permanent authority, and in the end, you will still need to have a chief inspector of accidents. So why do you not plan to create a permanent post instead? You're only asking for a 3-year supernumerary post. Chairman, after all, this is a new authority and a new arrangement. In fact, in the exchanges earlier this morning and earlier on at the panel discussion, in terms of the actual operation and actual staff establishment for the authority, many good suggestions have been made by members, and we have also considered those views. And today, we are not 100% sure about which is the best way forward. Well, for the authority, yes, in the long run, it has to be there. That's indisputable. But then for the staffing arrangements and deployment, and in the long run, what shape it should take, well, we believe that to play safe, we should create the post for 3 years first, and then after 3 years we can review the situation and then we'll decide later. For example, if this CIA were to be filled as a non-civil service contract staff, then we'd like to know after 3 years, is this the best arrangement? Should it continue, or should we hire someone as a civil servant who will take up the post? These are the issues to be considered, and also for the 6 non-directorate grade staff. Well, according to what has been discussed earlier on, should we also take some time to review the situation? We believe that there might be a need for a review to be conducted, but then at the same time we can also confirm that there is a long-term need for this independent authority to be set up. All right, members. So we still have 5 minutes to go, and one member would also like to ask a question. Mr. Eddie Chu, you're asking in the first round. I don't think we'll be able to deal with that today. We won't be able to put it to the vote, so we'll just adjourn the meeting at 10:30. So Mr. Eddie Chu asking in the first round. He has also submitted a number of written questions. So please do prepare for written reply next time. Mr. Eddie Chu. Madam Chair, I'd like to ask, well, for the establishment of this post of CIA, Chief Inspector of Accidents, does that mean that with this post created, we will still continue with the existing legislation and there is no need for us to amend the law? That's the first question. Well, Chairman, indeed, to tie in with the creation of this independent authority, Cap 448B will need to be amended. In other words, that's about civil aviation accidents investigation ordinance will need to be amended. And in fact, last week we already published a legislative brief which has been distributed to members. So that will be available today. Okay, so can you explain a bit further? I have 2 main questions. First, one of the reasons for setting up this independent authority is to make sure that it's independent. And then in the regulations, I think there are some parts about the Director General of Civil Aviation. For example, under Section 7.1, it says that he can designate certain officers to interview or to look into the remnants of the aircraft that was involved in the accident. So with the establishment of the investigation authority, would that mean that certain powers that are currently conferred upon the Director General would be transferred to the authority? Yes, indeed. In particular, you refer to Section 7.1 with regard to the removal of the remnants of the aircraft. Well, the powers would be transferred to the CIA. As to the details, in the legislative brief, we have already set that out. And in fact, this amendment, well, in a moment at the council meeting, we'll be tabling that amendment or amendment bill to this council. And what we are also concerned about is the investigation report on whether it will be disclosed. Well, in the government's paper, it says that generally speaking, such investigation reports will be made public. But then, when you look at the relevant legislation, in fact, the chief executive, if he is of the view that there might be grounds on the contrary, he can also choose not to disclose the report to the public, or he can also publish the report partially or in full to the public. So the power of the chief executive to decide if the report needs to be made public in full or partially or in part, I think that should be reviewed. Because in fact, in my view, such reports should be made public instead of giving the chief executive this discretion to decide if parts of it could be withheld from the public, or can be withheld from the public. Mr. Lai? Yes, I've taken on board this view, and I'm sure when this council deliberates on the amendment bill, there will be many chances for us to discuss that further with members. But then, basically, as it now stands, we have also made it very clear that is, unless the chief executive thinks otherwise, generally speaking, such reports should be made public. And if he chooses not to make public the reports, he will have to have very specific and valid grounds. And in fact, over the years, if I understood it correctly, all these investigation reports have been made public. Mr. Chu, it's like the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance. Well, whenever the law gives the chief executive a power, in fact, he doesn't have to be accountable to anybody at all. Well, only he can decide if those are good grounds or good reasons, because we have no way to tell. And therefore, I do not quite agree with what you said. I think the law should, on its own, make it clear that the chief executive will not be given that extensive power. For example, either it should be left to this council or an independent authority to decide. It would be more appropriate. Thank you. Madam Chair, on the use of public power, there has to be justifications. And for the details, we'll be discussing that with the relevant Bills Committee of this council. Yes, Mr. Chu, you have already overrun on your time. We still have 2 more minutes. Would you like to make use of the 2 minutes left to ask questions? Because for the next member, unless you want to extend the meeting, because you have so many questions, we won't have enough time for the next member to ask questions. Well, if you don't mind, we should extend the meeting a little bit so that Dr. Kokaki will be able to answer the questions, and I think we will be able to wrap up our discussion today on this. Okay? So you really take that very seriously. So with your support, can we extend the meeting by 15 minutes so we can deal with this matter? Because in principle, all members support this item. Okay, next, Dr. Kwokaki asking in the second round. Yes, Chairman, I'd like to allow the Secretary to answer the question. Next is about the air traffic control system, because whether it's the public or the civil aviation officers, they do not have any confidence in the system at all. And recently we have some near-miss incidents, and that can only be interpreted that they are the problems or the results of the failure of the new system. So I'd like to know if the CIA will be able to help the administration, because he's still under the THB. So will he be looking into the new system? And also on the building of the third runway, will you be able to make use of his experience so that in the design of the third runway and on the construction of the third runway, there will be fewer incidents? So these are the 2 questions.
P.S. On the legislative framework first, the CIA, or the Independent Investigation Authority, under our law and also our proposal, they will, in relation to the happening of an accident or serious incident, study why that happened. Well, can you be more clear? Before the person assumes suppose there have been so many incidents involving the air traffic control system, you should not wait till an accident happens before something is done, right? Okay, can you give me some more time? I'll answer that right away. If there are serious incidents, not to talk about accidents, he will look at all sides of the incident. Say if the incident is related to the air traffic control system or the design of the airport, he will say so. And the relevant units have to follow up duly. So that's number 1. You have to understand that this team is established to comply with the ICAO's requirements. So that's how it will work. We have this professional team here, and if they do have the capacity to look at general issues, then I think they will do that. Because they are familiar with aviation safety issues, after all. So I don't rule out that in the future, if it needed, they will provide some general advice to the Secretary or the administration. I will not rule that out. But the basic duty, well, you have to understand where I'm coming from. Well, they are there to investigate into serious incidents and accidents. But the question is, as you also pointed out, we'll be bringing in an experienced person. So I hope the person will be more forward-looking. They would just not study into accidents after they have happened. He should be forward-looking. So is there a system or mechanism whereby his expertise can also be leveraged upon? I'm not saying that it's part of his duty. I'm just saying that his expertise should be tapped as much as possible. As I answered, there is no ruling out of that. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok, first round. Madam Chair, I speak in support of this proposed establishment paper. I will not take up 5 minutes. As I understand it, we need an independent accident investigation authority, and that is to comply with the ICAO's requirement. In Hong Kong is a important regional aviation hub, and we should strengthen our framework, and that is very needed. And we have to fulfill our duties as a member of the ICAO. Now, the post will last up till 31st of March 2020. Well, less than 3 years. And in this period, we have to look carefully at the workload and the structure to see whether they are reasonable. We have to keep a close tabs on that, because after all, we are talking about having one airport in Hong Kong. We're different from other countries which have many airports. So in other countries, the authority may have to deal with several airports, but for Hong Kong, we just have one airport. So the workload will be different from that of our counterparts overseas. So I suggest that we would have to be reviewing the structure of the team in the next 2 years. Second round, Mr. Jeremy Tam. I'll be very quick. First, as I said, in the supplementary paper, CB 4927/1617 bracket 01 on the terms serious incidents and accidents. In paragraph 9, you said the last sentence is Annex 13 has definitions on serious incidents and accidents. And in the Chinese paper, you said that you have made this translation specially. So when you come to FC, please explain that clearly. Now, second point about recruitment for the other 4 officers, apart from the CIA post. We don't have suitable candidates in Hong Kong. I hope that if needed be, you should launch a global recruitment exercise too. If no suitable candidate can be found in Hong Kong, maybe more money is needed, but I will support it. And the third point, I need your answer on that. And again, it's on definition, Annex 2. For the ICAO's definitions, are you just copying their definitions, or have you made some amendments to their definitions? in your paper. Can I defer to Mr. Lau to answer your second question? And in relation to your first question, Mr. Tam, in paragraph 9 of the letter, it says, this is the ICAO or ICAO's official Chinese translations, and that is accident is translated is 事故, and serious incidents is 嚴重事故徵候. So we want to be as detailed as possible. So we are telling you the official Chinese translation of the ICAO. So that's their translation, yes. And in our legislative amendment proposal introduced to the electrical, we go by our usual conventions. And accidents is 意外, serious incidents is 嚴重事故. That's been the terminology used all along over the years in Hong Kong. So we'll stick to that. Mr. Lau, at the Economic Development Panel, we have also discussed this, and we had exchanges with Mr. Tam. We agree that if we can tap overseas talents, and then we will not rule out that possibility. The overriding principle is that the candidate must meet with our requirement. They should have the qualifications and the experience needed. Third question. Are you copying directly the terms in Annex 2? Yes, we are just copying the terms from ICAO. No additional deletion. Okay, can I add? Apart from the terminology, we will be using the established terminology in Hong Kong. Accident is 意外 in Chinese. But apart from that, the content basically remains the same. Yes, if you have no further question, I'll put this item to the vote. Those in favor, please raise your hand. 6. 7. Those against, please raise your hand. No objection. So I declare the agenda item passed. Do we need separate voting at FC? Yes, yes. Okay, thank you very much. When will the next meeting be? How many hours? Next Monday, 9 to 10:30 a.m. See you then. Thank you, members.